Hi everybody, we're going to start this talk about composition by talking about this rectangle and that every frame is special and has its own kind of characteristics inherent in the frame itself, in the proportions that you see. So let's start by something that you may or may not know. And I've put it in a written form so it's a little bit easier to see. But what we're looking at is a rectangle that's 1,280 pixels by 720 pixels, and that works out as an even fraction of 16 by 9. And the proportion, if you work it out to be a decimal value, is 1.778 approximately. And we know from talking about the golden mean that our whirling rectangle, the one that resembles a nautilus shell and that has many of the characteristics of living people, has a very different kind of proportion. And that proportion is not a whole number, nor is it even a number that repeats itself. It's a transcendental number, but we can take as an approximation 1.61803. And using that, we can calculate a golden rectangle. But right now, we're going to forget about our golden rectangle, and we're just going to think about the rectangle in front of us. Now, if you look at it, it already, when I load it up in Illustrator, you can see I already get the grid lines for what are considered the text safe and the broadcast safe areas of this image, which are, we'll go ahead and make some lines here so make it a little bit clearer. I'm just going to make a diagonal across here, and these diagonals turn out to be kind of important things. For the moment, I'm just going to put a very simple diagonal here. And it's pretty clear that if you take and make a rectangle, which I'm going to just make right now, a rectangle, and if I put it on the crosshair of this and I move it until all the crosshairs touch this rectangle, okay, that I have one that has the same proportional relationship as that it has to the whole. And maybe I'll go ahead and give that some kind of color, so make it maybe blue. And another interesting thing we find about that is if we decide to come down here, make a different color, maybe yellow, make that one yellow, we'll leave that one yellow, and we'll come back and we'll make it, right, we'll make that yellow. Okay, now let's come over here and make another one. But this time, I'm going to get rid of this rectangle for the moment, because I think we all understand that pretty clearly. I'm going to try something else. I'm going to take and make a rectangle from the corners. So what I'll do is I'll start here, and I'll put on that grid line, and you'll see that when I arrive at the corners, I have another rectangle that has the same proportional relationship to our overall rectangle as it did to the whole. And I could make more of these of different sizes. In fact, it's pretty clear that we could make these at, we'll give this a different, we'll do this a different color maybe. Get rid of this one, we'll leave one, and maybe I'll make one Apple Z. And now, well, what if we want to make one and we're interested in putting it somewhere that's not on this grid line? So I'm going to get rid of this rectangle for the moment. Okay, and I'm just going to draw a line. Make this shift so it's in line with this. Okay, there it is. And what I'll do is I'll take and create a line that intersects here. I want it to intersect that point. Okay, like so. Alright, now I come here to the other side and I make a line that intersects here. And now there's an interesting thing. Now that I have this central point, I can come back and intersect this middle point here. Line it up. Remember, I'm wearing glasses, so this will be probably a bit of an approximation, but that's fine because I think we'll all get the idea. Now, if I take those lines, oops, Control, and make a new box, a kind of crazy and amazing thing happens. When I make a box that sits on these lines here, I get another box, now off center, shifted, that I can put anywhere I want, that has the same proportional relationship to the whole. Now I hope this has really revised your idea of why you would use diagonals, because diagonals allow you to create within your frame areas that have the same proportional shape as the overall form. And let's just take a second and look at why we have the rule of threes. And I think now it is a little bit clearer what the rule of threes really does. Okay, and to try to convince you that this is not just true in the case for rectangles and with squares, let's try it on a pentagon here. And I'm going to go, since I figured out some of these in advance, and I'm going to put in my diagonals that all move to the center. And then I'm going to start to put in some more shapes. And you can see we get the same kind of relationship where the object is different in size, but the proportion remains the same. And I think this is becoming more clear that shape holds a certain kind of proportional information. So let's get rid of this and look at something else. A blob, a completely irregular shape. And let's see what happens when we add another blob. It's the same blob, actually, just increased in size. And we'll do that again. And we can clearly see that these three objects are the same. So now we go and we create a still larger one. Now, what if we select the central one and we begin to change its proportions? Immediately, if I make it longer or thinner, in that distortion, shape is no longer the same, and this form and this form become, in many ways, fundamentally different. And all of this sounds very nice and not too far from what you learned in kindergarten. I'm going to interrupt it with a pretty bold statement. The subjective reality of any content is determined by its frame. And I mean any content, and I mean any frame. And the only way to really begin to illustrate this is this illusion. The two tables in front of you are exactly the same size and exactly the same shape. The text, other than orientation, is exactly the same size and exactly the same shape. Measure it and see. Pause now. Give yourself a moment and really do this and know this is true. How we perceive size is influenced by the objects around an object. It's not entirely within the object itself. Not just size, but shape itself can appear distorted by the objects around it. What's really important about all these illusions is that they're exaggerations of an effect that happens with every frame, and that's why composition is so important. Which leads us back to where we started, at the frame.